is up, everyone? Good morning. Welcome to episode 10 of Coast to Coast College Football Pregame Show. I am your host, Bill Shawcross. With me, as always, my Buckeye brother from another mother, Cottrell Simpson. How are you feeling this morning, sir?
Hey, I'm feeling absolutely phenomenal. I'm still on the right side of the college football eliminator this Saturday morning, so I'm very happy and I'm very, thankful to be where we're at.
Well, listen, I feel that, and I still to this day can say the same. My man on the West Coast, Mr. West Coast, Mr. I Black, Mr. Alex Elmore cannot stay the same. But that being said, good morning, sir. Good morning from the East Coast to the West Coast. How are you feeling this morning?
Good morning. Good morning. Yes, it is early, but I am excited. I got the eye black on back, or I got eye black back on, which you know what that means. Another Oregon Duck victory. Still early in the season, and hopefully after today, maybe the Ducks will make their way back onto the correct side of that eliminator bracket. So I'm excited to find out.
Either they make their way back, or you come on with no eye black next week. So
you come on with two red. You can come back on with two red X's under your eyes next week. But that being said, we got another jam-packed show for everybody this morning. So, we have our normal previews. We're going to recap last week's action. We have the college football eliminator, and as we just kind of previewed, there's been some movement. And on top of that, this Tuesday night is the first revealing of the college football playoff rankings. We're going to give them to you ahead of time, and we're going to tell you what they should be, or at least what we all think they should be. We'll have our normal pickup segment, upset alert. We're going to give it to you all. We're going to get it all done before noon kickoff for everybody. So we're going to jump right in because we got a lot to go over. So we want to start right with our recaps. This game hurt my soul a little bit. Riley Leonard, Duke, went into Florida State, and for about, I would say a little over 3 quarters, gave Florida State everything they could. Riley Leonard tried to gut it out and play through what was obviously still a very ailing ankle. Defense held him in it for a while, just down the stretch. Jordan Travis made a couple plays in the third quarter. It was just too much. Defense clamped down a little bit. And Florida State pulled away. I would say this is definitely one of those games, 30-20. The game was not this far apart. This was a one-possession game. Honestly, Duke was in front for 2.5 quarters. They were up by a field goal or a touchdown most of the game. Very, very beginning parts of this game, Duke was definitely the better football team. Don't let 38-20, scare you into thinking Florida State dominated this game because it's not accurate. Cottrell, I know you were on the same side as this with me. We both took this, as one of our picks last week, unfortunately. I think we both are two of the ones that kind of really, bought into the Duke, miracle Cinderella story per se. But just not enough Riley Leonard down the stretch with the ankle. Too much Florida State. What'd you think?
Yeah, for sure. Obviously Riley Leonard not being 100% factored into what this game was, but like you said, for a better part of 3 quarters, Duke was the better football team in this one. They went to the fourth quarter up 20-17, and I thought that this was a game that they were going to pull off. I was like, yes, this is the Duke team I was expecting to show up against this Florida State team and give them all they could handle. But then that fourth quarter came. Jordan Travis, for lack of a better term here, put the team on his back, won on. They scored 21 unanswered, and this is the score that you ultimately end up with. So I got to give all the credit in the world to that Florida State team because I will say Duke had their number defensively. It was a struggle for Florida State to get up and down the field on that Duke team for those first 3 quarters. But you saw it. Obviously, Duke was having a lot of success in the run game, and they were really relying on that defense. But in that fourth quarter, you see that offense get stagnant because they really became one-dimensional. Once you get down, 2 scores in that fourth quarter and you have to make up time quickly, you put that pressure on Riders, and he wasn't healthy enough to deliver for you. So give credit to Florida State for battling adversity, being down in the fourth quarter and still finding a way to win by as much as they did. But that Duke football team, they had it in their grasp, and they just let it slip away. So it's just tough. But, sometimes it's just the way the cookie crumbles.
I really hope this Duke team can kind of hang on down the stretch because I really think they deserve a really good bowl game at the end of the year, and I don't know how that's all going to play out. There are a lot of seniors on this team. Once they officially become eliminated from the ACC title, title race, I don't know how many of those guys have like real good draft prospects and might shut it down. I don't know if they shut Riley Leonard down, which if they do is going to be a big, a big chink in the armor for that team. I hope they stay together. I hope as a class they just play it out and get a really good bowl game, maybe even a New Year's Six day still, depending on what happens. But Alex, give me some ACC breakdown.
Alex is not with us. I don't know if he's just upset. I don't know if Bo Nix just announced that he's no longer playing. I don't know if they got caught up in some mess over there in Oregon, but Alex he said to hell with this recap. So, I
think Alex is trying to avoid the inevitable of what's going to happen here when we get to College Football Eliminator. But we're going to move on to the next one. Show must go on, as they say in the show business.
Absolutely. We'll go back for him once he's back or see what he had to say. But
all right. Again, this is. I don't want to pile on here. But me and especially you have been talking about this for weeks now. That USC was begging to get beat, and this defense was gonna catch up to them. It happened last week against Notre Dame, and that Utah is USC's kryptonite at this point. They went into USC without Cam Rising, who they finally announced. They just said, "Hey, we're going to shut him down for the year. He's just not going to play. Like we're going to go with the horses we have." And they went into USC and stuck it to Caleb Williams again, which is just crazy. Caleb had a good game. Good. Probably very average for Caleb Williams. What we're used to seeing from him. Yeah. Bryson Barnes, I think that's the best he's looked since he started playing. They put a lot on his shoulders in this game, and for the most part, he delivered. They threw the ball, 23 times, which is kind of a lot for him. Oh,
and I'm back.
Mr. Pac-12 is back.
I'm sorry, Jim Harbaugh stole my signal. My bad.
See, I feel this is all orchestrated now. I feel like Cottrell kicked him out on purpose. But Utah, another huge win, keeps them in it, sets it up an enormous matchup later today in Salt Lake City that we're going to preview, which one of the panelists on the show is very excited / nervous for. He can lie all he wants, but he's nervous.
It's the same guy who predicted a 21-point win at Washington. So I can only imagine what we're going to hear later today.
Ooh, shots fired. But that being said, I want both your takes on this because I think it's very interesting. USC, for lack of a better term, is done. They have no college football playoff aspirations. Like they're out. They're way behind the 8 ball Pac-12 wise now. How do you think, does this team crumble? There's starting to be rumors swirling that Lincoln Riley might go to the NFL. There's rumors swirling that are picking up a lot of steam that Caleb Williams is going to shut it down. What do you think? First of all, what do you think about the game? And then secondly, what do you guys think happens going forward for the rest of the year with USC?
Well, personally, I love the back and forth of this game. It was exactly what it has been the last 2 times they've played. Absolutely great games. Honestly, I think this might have been the game of the week for me personally after watching the whole day of football. Utah came out hot in that second half. They scored in their first drive, and then they converted on USC's only turnover of the day, and then they went up 2 scores, and that was kind of it from there. And one thing I really noticed is that Caleb Williams the last couple of weeks has looked really pedestrian. I'm not sure if maybe I'm overreacting, if I'm just too much of a stats guy, but he hasn't looked like, a Heisman winner the last couple of weeks. And at the beginning of the season, we were talking nonstop about how, guess what? USC's got another Reggie Bush and Zachariah Branch. And he only had 2 touches outside of special teams in that game. Why are they not giving the ball to their playmakers? And that's really the most concerning to me is like, in close games like this, you want to put the ball in your best player's hands. Zachariah Branch showed he's one of those playmakers when he was able to take that kick return all the way back into Utah territory at the end of the game to set up them to going up ahead in the last few minutes of the fourth quarter. So I don't really get Lincoln Riley's play calling, the use of his players. If he wants to go to the NFL, I don't think he'll be successful there. I think he'll kind of be like a Chip Kelly type thing where he'll bounce around a couple of years and ultimately end up back in college, but that's for another conversation. But I think USC is probably going to be shutting it down. I think Caleb Williams should shut it down. And I'm really, quite frankly, upset that Zachariah Branch is not getting more touches. That's why I'm kind of sitting on it.
So my take on it is, first off, Caleb Williams absolutely should not shut it down. 2 games, two losses. You still have a lot to play for in the sense of last year they went. Obviously, they ended the season. They had 2 losses. They only had 1 loss going into the Pac-12 game. Alex, I know what you're trying to do. You're telling Caleb you want him to sit before that Oregon game, so that game becomes just a easy check mark, easy win there. You don't have to worry about anything. I already think Oregon wins that game, and I know we're not there yet, but Oregon's going to win that game regardless. USC defense stinks, but Caleb should absolutely play the rest of the season here. Set out the bowl game if that's what he wants to do, whatever. As far as USC goes in this game, I agree 100% with Alex. I do think, you have to ultimately get the ball in your playmakers' hands. And Taj Washington did have a good game when you look at the numbers, but Zachariah Branch, like he mentioned, should be USC's number 1 or number 2 option. Now, I do understand this was his first game back from his injury, so he's been out a few weeks, so maybe they're just trying to ease him back into it. But Brendan Rice is another guy who had been consistently making plays for you as well. And, he wasn't necessarily featured in this. Now, I do think Caleb Williams has been kind of set to an unrealistic standard just because of how well he's played in the past. But at the same time, at some point, you got to beat Utah. Like, this is their backup quarterback. Bryson Barnes has looked better each and every week. I do want to give him credit for that. But this Utah team, in reality, wasn't that team that was supposed to be in the mix for winning a Pac-12 championship this year. And so you were supposed to beat this Utah team. I get it last year. Cam Rising, old vet in that room for them. Dalton Kincaid was there. Like, they had playmakers last year. Still inexcusable that you lost to him twice, but I understand why you lost. This one was one of those games you were already coming off of a loss. And not only just a regular loss, it was an awful loss. You got blown out by Notre Dame. You were fighting for literally your life at this point, and you still go out there and lose. So it's a tough blow for them, but got to give all the credit to Utah. They announced that Cam Rising wasn't going to be playing anymore this season, and they still went out there and they said, hey, we got a lot to play for. We don't care who's back there at quarterback. So give the Utes all the credit in the world.
I would ask you this, and Cottrell, you know me. I'm always Mr. like play for your team, and like I'm that guy. Like I'm very, very, very rarely on the, shut it down and worry about yourself, track. Like, that. That being said, with Caleb, I mean, like he's the unanimous, like he's going to be the number 1 pick. I mean, I think we can all agree on that. Like either, somebody that ends up with the 1 pick's going to take him, or somebody's probably going to trade up to get him.
Yep.
Yeah, I agree.
Is it really worth him, like especially if they get another loss? Like, is it really worth him risking going out there playing at that point? Like, he's shown everything he's going to show. Like, does he want to turn around in hindsight and be like, damn, like I broke my ankle or I tore my ACL in a game that literally mattered, like didn't matter at all? Like,
here's what I'm gonna say. It depends. It depends what the chances. It depends how big of a competitor he is. Meaning, if they get another loss, I think he shuts it down. If Utah loses another game, I think he shuts it down because that puts them both at two conference losses. And I think if he's a true competitor, as long as USC and Utah have a chance of playing each other in the Pac-12 championship, which they both still do have a chance with both 1 conference loss, as long as that's still a possibility, if he's a competitor, he still plays until that is no longer a possibility. Because there's no way in hell I'm leaving college 0-3 to Utah. I want to get that win. Whether it takes 4 times to get it or not, as long as that's a possibility, I'm staying in. But that's just me.
See,
I don't even think
the odds of even that happening are crazy, though.
I was going to say, for me, I don't even think it has to be Utah that's that Pac-12 championship. If I'm Caleb, I want to be a Pac-12 champion, at this point. And I do think that for Caleb as well, it's different for a lot of other players because a lot of other players aren't as good as what Caleb Williams is. I say this and I 100% mean this when I say it. I think Caleb Williams could tear his ACL tomorrow and still be the number 1 pick in the draft. I think he's that good.
I don't disagree with that. I think somebody would still take him all right, we're just not going to have him this rookie year anyway, whatever.
Yep.
But again, you never know how you're going to come back from that. I know they're a dime a dozen now and everybody gets them and everything else, but it's why even have to go through that rehab or miss a year or even put yourself in that, position for it to even possibly happen. And again, I am usually the Mr. I don't care. Go out and play with your team. That's what you're there for. But this one's a little bit unique to me. So it's just a little food for thought. And again, I think we're going to figure out a lot about this in the next couple of weeks, depending on what happens, especially in the Pac-12. Because I think if, depending on how the game later today goes, if that goes a certain way, and Washington still doesn't have a loss. I mean, the hopes of both these teams could take a major hit after the game this afternoon. So something just a little food for thought. Just wanted to get your guys' take on it, and it's just something to watch going forward. The Lincoln Riley thing is interesting to me because I think we all and he's doing a good job. I think we all thought this was going to be home for a while because he's denied, he's kind of turned his cheek at the NFL, before. And I feel with not having the success that I think maybe he thought he was going to have in the first 2 years out there, it's weird to me that his name came up out of nowhere a lot from a lot of people that are pretty connected to the NFL. I'm not saying he's going to leave, but I think this might be the time that he necessarily doesn't turn down all the meetings. And I think that could be interesting.
I will say this is, I get it. The ultimate goal is to go out there and try to win a championship. Lincoln Riley was a win away from going to the college football playoff in his first year at USC. So that's not just something to sneeze at. And that just doesn't happen overnight. Not. And I think the other thing too, is that I know that USC has 2 losses and they're essentially eliminated from, college football playoff talks. The Pac-12 is in their hands and they control their own destiny. They play Washington still. They play Oregon still. They win those 2 games, they're going to be in the Pac-12 championship. So there is still stuff to play for at the moment. Now, that could change at the blink of an eye. You go out there and you get railroaded by Washington or Oregon. I understand, at that point, the conversation shifts. But right now, you still have a lot to play for. Because, who knows what happens the rest of the way out, There's other teams that can still fall that have tough schedules because the parity in college football this year is insane. And so although you still have some undefeated teams and a lot of one-loss teams, you could ultimately end the season, seeing a lot of teams get a 1 or 2 in that L column. So
I know we talk about this a lot, and every year I feel like everybody's like, oh, this is the year I wish we had the top 8 or top 12 in the playoff. And I think last year there's probably a couple teams that could have argued that they got in, but I feel like the Final 4 were the right 4 last year. This would have been I would have loved to have seen the playoffs start this year with the parity we have. We'll talk about it a little bit more when we get to Eliminator in a couple of minutes, but this would have been really interesting top 10 or top 12 to have this year.
Could you imagine the quarterbacks in that playoff?
Yeah, you're not wrong, and that's part of it. But we'll table that for a couple of minutes. We'll get back to this. I'll bring this back up to you guys in a couple of minutes when we get to Eliminator. What's next? Tennessee, Alabama.
Very quick.
I was going to say another game where you had it in the palm of your hands. Tennessee looked great, and then they just folded like military sheets. I don't know what. Joe Milton came back down to earth. They let Bama back in with explosive plays. The one thing I said they couldn't have, and then this game got ugly. So
I don't know when you guys are going to start to believe me about Joe Milton. and I tell you this, and I say this in this fashion. If he was really that good, there's a whole lot of people around Ann Arbor that have been really upset when he transferred out. There wasn't any. He's a kid that has all the athletic gifts God can give one person. And he's a great kid too. I'm not saying anything bad about him negatively. He just hasn't really grasped the mental side of being a quarterback at a major program yet. The game just speeds up for him too much. This is one of those games. Cottrell just nailed it. It was. If you watched the first quarter and a half of this game, you were like, Alabama's in a lot of trouble. And then if you went to like eat dinner and came back like an hour later, you were like, damn, Tennessee's going to lose this football game. And that's really what happened. It was
tale of two halves.
It was. And the second half, I hate to say it. I mean, it was. I told you guys last week this was what was going to happen. I thought there was a chance Tennessee could win. It just really, this game just stuck out to me as a game that Nick Saban was going to find a way to win, and he did. Jalen Milton, pedestrian, good enough, a little bit above game manager, I would say somewhere in there. J.C. McClellan had another really solid game out of the running back, and the defense clamped down the second half, and it looked like a Nick Saban win. It was tread water till we figured it out. And then we figured out we're going to score. Defense is going to clamp down. You're done. You're going home with an L. And here we are. What'd you guys think? And then I think we have to do this. I think they're hanging around now. Like they had that loss to Vienna to Texas, and now they're still sitting here 7-1, 8-1, wherever they are. By all means, they're going to win the West. Where do we have Alabama? Like, what are we realistically thinking about Alabama?
Well, we're going to talk about that here soon, Bill. Don't jump ship just yet. But no, just like you guys said, it was a tale of two halves. I mean, Alabama was down 20-7 at halftime and then scored 27 unanswered points. And the thing that really is crazy to me is when I was watching bits and pieces of that game, because there were so many games on at that time, I was kind of jumping back and forth. When Tennessee was up in the second half, before Alabama made their full comeback, they were still trying to air the ball out. They were still trying to keep up score for score, but they have a three-headed monster in the backfield, the Samson, Small, and Wright. They only got 23 touches. Joe Milton's throwing the ball 41 times. They were only down in this game for like half of the fourth quarter. Why were they not trying to control the clock more? Why were they not trying to run the ball more? Like I said, I watched the game. Maybe you guys saw something that I did not. It was not a very well-managed game by Tennessee. Obviously, Nick Saban is a better coach. He had his guys ready to play in that second half. Whatever he said at halftime works. And Jalen Milroe, is he impressing me? He's starting to get there. I don't know about Heisman talks, like all the talk that he's been getting around, social media and whatnot. But he's definitely starting to impress me. And I am excited to see, Alabama's matchups these next couple weeks.
I'm still pumping the brakes on Jalen Milroe. I think numbers wise, his numbers are definitely like getting there. But again, I want to see a defense limit those big plays. I want to see him go down and, and that's not taken away from him, because the big plays, you still do have to create those. But I want to see Jalen Milroe be able to manage a game, because against some other, of these top teams, those explosive plays aren't going to happen. So I want to see him, drive the ball. And, if he has to have a 10-play drive, I want to see him not make that mistake where he fumbles it, or not make that mistake where he throws a pick. So I'm still not quite there yet. I give him credit because he's faced a lot of adversity so far throughout just the beginning of this season, but I'm not quite aboard the Jalen Milroe hype train just yet. That's
fair. I think Alabama is getting better at putting him in positions to win, and they're kind of really starting to find the common ground, the wheelhouse of where they can scheme things, what he's comfortable throwing and doing. I do agree with Cottrell a little bit. I think eventually they're going to play somebody that's going to be like, all right, well, we're not going to let you throw the ball 50 yards downfield. And if you can do that, then we're going to make you throw the ball 10 to 15 yards and march down the field and do that 6 or 7 times a game. And I don't think he's capable of doing that yet. But until somebody stops it, you got to give him credit. I still don't think he is where, I don't think he's reached his peak or his ceiling yet. And I have to give the kid credit. I mean, listen, it is not easy to be a quarterback at Alabama. And he looks better now than he did in the year. He took a lot of crap at the beginning of the year. He got benched. You do have to give the young man some credit and about the way he handled himself. He took it all in stride and got his second chance. He's made the most of it. So Alabama's just hanging around, man. Just a team you don't like. I promise you, like nobody will probably say it publicly, but everybody's hoping somebody gives them a second loss because it's you give Nick another month and a half, 2 months to coach, and I don't know what I don't know what Alabama looks like 8 weeks from now. So they are the team you kind of you're side eyeing a little bit, like you see them over in the corner. You just want to make sure like they know they're there and you keep them there.
You show up to the funeral just to make sure they're dead, kind of thing.
Correct. Make sure that dirt got put on the casket.
That's getting real dark real fast.
That's what we do.
Here we go.
What we got left? Oh, I was shocked we went here. I thought we were going to save this for last.
Isn't this last?
This is last.
Oh, it is. Okay, yeah, I guess it is. All right.
Yeah.
It's early in the morning. I'm tired. All right. I'm going to make this simple. This is exactly what I thought we were going to get. I think we all agree it was going to be a little low scoring. Two really good defenses. I said one quarterback was going to have to outplay the other. That was very apparent. I think Maya Williams did a good job. Travion is just not there yet. But, when you have three backs like Ohio State does, you don't have to worry about it. Marvin Harrison proved why he is the best receiver in college football by about 7 miles. And Penn State just is what Penn State is right now. And I don't mean that in a disrespectful way. I said this year was going to come down to Ohio State and Michigan. And I believe that from the get-go. And not because Penn State's not good. I just think they're a year away. I think if we had divisions next year, which we're not going to now, but if we did, I think Penn State would be a landslide, runaway favorite to win the East next year. Drew Aller showed his age this weekend. I felt bad for the kid. I know he put a lot of what happened on his shoulders and blames himself. And that's not the case. It's just they have young receivers. They have a good running game that Ohio State's defense, for the most part, shut down. And they said, they're like, we're going to make Drew Aller beat us. And he couldn't. You got to give Ohio State a ton of credit on defense. And, Kyle McCord didn't have a great game by any means. Played very well, but he was smart enough to know, you know what, I'm just going to keep throwing the ball to Harrison until they take it away. And Penn State couldn't. James Franklin, like I've said a million times, cannot coach himself out of a wet bag. He made no adjustments whatsoever. Couldn't even put a safety over Marvin Harrison, or didn't show any wrinkles offensively to even make Jim Knowles think about running something different. And they got beat. This is what Penn State does. And again, I don't mean it in a negative way. I felt like they were a year away. I still think they're a year away. They're going to be a really good team next year. And I hope they get a new freaking coach because Franklin stinks. I'm going to go to Coachella on this one first, obviously for obvious reasons. I want to know what you guys saw.
So the biggest thing for me was kind of one of the biggest points that I made last week, in that I knew if Penn State was going to win this game, I thought they would have to find ways to get explosive plays. And you see it just looking at the numbers there. They were 1 for 16 on third down conversions, and so making Drew Aller make those plays and drive the ball up and down the field, I just knew that wasn't going to be the recipe for success for Penn State. Now I thought, if they could hit a long bomb and shorten that field for Aller, I thought then he would have, he'd be able to pick us apart and have some success there. But clearly that wasn't the case for him. And then on the other side of the ball for Ohio State, I mean, I think that the offense struggled in that first half. Like I see, you look at McCord's numbers and you'd say, oh, he had a pretty good game. But I think a lot of that was, hey, Marvin Harrison, we got to find ways to get him the football. And Marv even had a couple drops in that one that were kind of uncharacteristic for him. But at the end of the day, I think Kyle McCord understands that, hey, I'm not Justin Fields. I'm not CJ Stroud. I can't go out there and make the crazy plays. I'm going to do what I can to make sure we put points on the board, but I'm going to make sure I'm not going to lose you guys the game either. Only has 1 pick on the season so far. I know, let Alex tell it, he should have 2. But I will say with McCord, you keep finding ways to win games, people are going to be perfectly content with that. So I don't need you to go out there and be Superman. You don't got to be Caleb Williams. Let the defense step up, because that's what clearly, that seems to be the strength of our team this year. And then Mayan Williams just did what he had to do. Rather pedestrian, but, if you can be somewhat successful on the ground, keep the ball out of McCord's hands and, pick up those third and shorts, you're going to be in a good spot. So I love what I saw out of Ohio State.
Well, I'm going to start off with a little bit of a vent, but I promise it's going to roll into my next section here. Okay. So Booger McFarland at the end of the Penn State-Ohio State game said something that's been driving me nuts all week about this game. And he was saying that Penn State lost because they didn't trust Drew Aller. That's what he said. He gets paid money to tell us that Penn State didn't trust their quarterback. The dude threw 42 passes. If you ask me, they trusted him too much. Nick Singleton was averaging 5.3 yards per carry. In that first quarter, he broke off some amazing runs against the Ohio State defense, had Penn State looking like they were about to score touchdowns. But he only touched the ball 9 times. I mean, Penn State's play calling blows my mind. If they run the ball more, that 1 for 16 on third down conversions, that number goes up. Your drives are more sustained. You get more yards. You get better field position. You have a chance for more field goals and maybe a couple touchdown passes. But Penn State's play calling was absolutely crazy. He was playing from the beginning of the game as if he was down 20 points. Like he was playing like he was down the entire game instead of trying to manage the clock, get Aller into rhythm, get Singleton some hands, the ball for handoffs. Marvin Harrison absolutely killed it on the Ohio State side. I was hoping that Penn State, that matchup, I was hoping that Marvin Harrison would have a little bit better of a matchup, honestly. But he showed why he's going to be in the NFL next season and probably the top 10 pick. So, I mean, I can't really argue about that. Ohio State did what they needed to do. But for me, Penn State showed me who they truly are, and Ohio State just keeps on beating teams in the top 10. So I'm having a hard time hating on Ohio State today. But I'm really disappointed the fact that Penn State didn't run the ball more, because last week I said the key to them winning was going to be controlling the ground game, and they only ran the ball 18 times through 3 quarters. That's absolutely crazy to me.
I mean, it's not hard to hate Ohio State. I mean, you can find another reason. Trust me, there's lots of them. But it was an interesting week. I'll say that. I mean, we have a couple big matchups this week, but we're starting to get, we're starting to, I would say, kind of get into focus here of what we're looking at down the stretch. And with that being said, we're going to get into college football eliminator here. X's are piling up. I gotta say, Cotrella's starting to earn his money on the right hand side of this, the graphics. It's getting lonely on the left. We have Georgia left. Ohio State. Do room. We do have room for if people, maybe want to, maybe switch back over. We'll see. We got Georgia, Ohio State, Florida State, Washington, Oklahoma, and Michigan. Two of those are going to take care of themselves. Obviously, Ohio State has Michigan left, and vice versa. I don't know who. Washington has USC left, and who else? So they have Utah.
I did not get their games.
I don't think they do.
So. I think they got maybe Oregon State.
Yeah, I don't see that happening. I mean, they haven't played really well since the Oregon game, if we're being honest.
So they got USC, Utah, Oregon State, and then Washington State to finish the year. That's a gauntlet.
Woo! That's 4 losses right there.
Yep. So anyways, Washington's got stuff left. OU's got, depending on who you ask, maybe a tricky one today. We'll get into that soon. I think if they get through that, though, I know they have Bedlam left with Oklahoma State. This is not a normal Mike Gundy, Oklahoma State type team. I don't think
They're getting
Oklahoma's
hot, Bill. They're getting hot.
They're getting hot, beating nobodies.
Just saying.
Pac-12, Big 12 was special.
It could. I mean, listen, it could be. I mean, we've talked about this numerous times. It's Big 12 teams have a tendency to just lose to a shitty team out of nowhere for no reason. So it could happen. I'm not saying it couldn't happen. I'd be a little shocked if it happened this year. Florida State, I think, is going to pretty much cakewalk into the ACC championship game at this point. I mean, I don't know who do they have left. Miami.
They got Miami and Florida on the 25th.
Florida won't matter for ACC.
I know, but I'm just saying.
I mean, if that's a loss, though, that definitely.
Chuck, yeah, I get it. I get it on that, but I mean, Miami's not beating Florida State. Miami is just not good.
No.
On the right side, Penn State has come over to say hello. Utah is still alive, maybe just for another couple hours. Ole Miss, Texas hanging around. On to a backup quarterback now, though, with Quinn Ewers down for probably looking at least like a month. Alabama still hanging around. Oregon at Utah today. Going to get into that very shortly.
Winner of that game deserves to get moved back over. I'm just saying.
Relax. They've been over there for one week, and you're trying to make rules to get them back over there already.
If Bama hasn't made their way back over by taking out the teams that they've taken out, then Oregon, they can be outside of the club for a little bit.
As always, Cottrell, the voice of reason, and North Carolina, who just the biggest. They have the biggest dud game to get over here out of anybody. Losing that game 2 weeks ago was just awful. But this is where we stand now. So I would tell you, I mean, Michigan's going to have a tricky game against Penn State in a couple weeks. But if they get through that, both those two are Michigan and Ohio State. Neither one of them are going to move until the 26th. The rest of it, who knows? I mean, it's, I guess there's obviously games they could trip up somewhere along the way, but I think all these teams on the left are probably going to stay here for a little bit.
My question, though, is this. Obviously, I think I had it in my preview, season preview. I had Texas making the college football playoff. How short of a leash does Sark give? Because they're not starting Arch this week. They're starting Murphy.
Malik. Yeah.
They didn't
start
bring
Malik
Arch.
Murphy.
They didn't bring Arch in last week. They went right to Malik Murphy.
But this week, Malik is your starter. Sark said that Arch took some first team reps in practice. He might get him in just to get his feet wet. Malik Murphy's looking over his shoulder every single incompletion. So I just want to know how long that leash is.
I think it's a twofold answer in that I think Sark did the right thing in getting Arch first team reps in case Malik doesn't play well. He doesn't want to throw a cold Archie in there. But at the same time, he kind of creates that situation you're talking about. I think Malik Murphy probably went to practice like, I'm going to be QB1 and run with the ones all day, and then I'm just going to give Archie a run. And so that already automatically just puts in the back of his head, like, hey, I have 3 bad series in a row, I'm going to get benched. Makes you squeeze the ball a little bit. Makes you, try to fit a ball maybe in a window that you shouldn't. Granted, they're playing BYU. I think they should be fine no matter who they put under center. But listen, he's got a delicate balance there. They can't afford another loss. It most certainly won't eliminate them from the Big 12. But it's going to eliminate them from the college football playoff. And I had Texas in mind as well. So Sark's got to walk that balancing line. It's tough, and that's what good coaches have to do. You got to figure it out. You got to figure out a way to motivate your kids and get them to play, but still, show confidence in them and let them at least feel you have their back. So, it's a good question. It's going to be interesting to see how that plays out later today.
And I think he's going to stick in. I think he's going to stay with him the whole game. I think he saw, if you're a coach, you're watching football, on your off time, and if he saw how Nick Saban handled the Alabama QB situation, that was a cluster. You know, that I forgot who they were playing when they switched quarterbacks to 3 different QBs that game.
USF,
I think he kind of saw what that kind of did to the team and the camaraderie with everybody. And Alabama barely escaped with the win that game. So I think he's going to play it smart. I think he's, got the kids' confidence up. He's going to stick with them the whole game. If he needs to make a change, he's going to do it smartly and do it throughout the week.
All right. I mean, that is fair. I mean, listen, again, just BYU, that's kind of a game to kind of, keep your eye on at least, I would hope they're up big in the third quarter, something like that. And maybe you do get them. Yeah. You still get it. You do get a dose of Archie then. I'd love to see the kid play in real game and see what he does.
Me too.
But I think the most important thing, Alex going again.
Alex hates us today.
He's not happy with us today. Not enough, I guess, Oregon love so far. But I think it is he has to, above all else, make sure that he gets wins. That's what it's got to be. Texas cannot slip up again. That team is too good to kind of piss the season away and not make the playoff.
No, for sure.
I'm like you. I had them in there. So,
I mean, I just think the one other thing too, and I asked that question because obviously I think everybody would imagine that Archer's ceiling is going to be higher than what Malik Murphy's is. And so I almost just wonder, let's say Quinn, obviously it's slated that he's supposed to be out somewhere between like 3 to 4 weeks. Let's say, he's not able to be back or he's just getting back before, the end of the regular season. I feel like Texas might feel more confident throwing Arch out there, knowing that he has that big playability. Now, I'm not saying Malik Murphy doesn't, but Arch, highly touted recruit, and you never know how some of these late games in the season are going to go.
I agree. I mean, and again, it's we'll keep an eye on it, see what happens. Jesus, he's back. Can't get rid of him.
And I'm back.
He's like herpes.
Always popping up.
It's always popping up at the wrong time. All right,
Doctor's stressing me out, man.
All right, so we're gonna go to our first unveiling of Coast to Coast's college football playoff rankings. This is not exactly what you might see tomorrow night or Tuesday night. Sorry, this is what you should see. Our rankings are gonna be better than what you're gonna see because they're gonna make more sense. Cottrell is just all right. Cottrell's just gonna. I don't even know what to say. This is not what I thought I was going to look at. I love when these get revealed. All right. So we all have Alabama. We all have Alabama number 10, which I think to some degree is interesting. I was a little weary about where I was going to put Alabama at Penn State, if I'm being honest, because I thought that was kind of the who was the better one-loss team. I went with Penn State because I think if they went on a neutral site, I think there's a better chance than not that Penn State can win that game. It's a little bit of a tough argument to make after this past weekend. But that being said, let's go through them. We'll just snake through these. Cottrell, why don't you start at number 9 since we all had Alabama number 10?
Yeah. So just my biggest thing, how I had the difference between Bama and Penn State was Bama lost their game at home to a team who I think is number 7 right now in Texas. Penn State lost their game, one possession game on the road. And I know Penn State scored in garbage time, but it was on the road against a team that, whether you have them 1, 2, or 3, they're a top 3 team in the country. So that was really just my designation between those two teams. But still think Penn State is a very live one-loss team. And I think they still have a lot in front of them. So I wanted to put them there at 9.
I agree. I mentioned earlier in the show, they had, we go to Happy Valley in a couple weeks, and that's going to be their season. If they win that game, they're back in it. And it becomes a very interesting, race kind of down the stretch. But they still have a lot to play for. So, I kept them at number 9, kind of the same reason Cottrell did. They lost on the road at Ohio State. Alabama got beat at home. So, I think Penn State's loss is a better looking loss at this point. So, I'm going to kick it over to Alex because he's got crazy teams ranked at number 9. And I know what you're doing, Alex. I just want to put you on notice that
Facts.
I know what you're doing here. I know what you're doing here. We're on to you. We're on to you. It's fine. I'm not even going to disrespect it because I get it. Me and Cottrell don't have to worry about that because both our teams are in the top 3. But I just want to put you on notice that me and Cottrell
we see
absolutely 100% see you and know what you're doing with this.
You are caught in 4K.
I don't even know what I'm doing with this, so you'll have to update me.
Well, you try to make this case for them being number 9 then.
All right, Oregon State, 6-1 on start off the season. Their only loss this season was to Washington State when Washington State was at their hottest. Obviously, they've cooled down lately, so that loss doesn't look that great now. But at the time, Washington State was number 16 in the country. Like they were rolling on all cylinders. Their running attack, they're averaging 195 yards per game on the ground, and they got a really, really experienced quarterback with DJU back there. And he's just dropping down to Jack Velling, who's their tight end, 223 yards, 5 touchdowns in the last 2 games. And, the one thing that kind of worries me about Oregon State, their offense is clicking, is their secondary was supposed to be the strength of this team. And over the last and against Washington State and Cal, they've allowed both of those teams to go over 400 yards passing. They lost the Washington State game, and the Cal game was a lot closer than it should have been. So that's something to look at going forward. But with the Pac-12, I have them having a quite an easy schedule coming up. I thought I had. Here we go. They got the only 2 games they have left are Washington on the 18th and Oregon on the 24th to end the season. But they could go into those weeks sitting at 8-1, 9-1, and we could be sitting at those 2 games determining who goes to the Pac-12 championship. So you laugh now, but we'll see when those BCS, what are we, back in 2002? When the rankings come out, I think they're going to be higher than a lot of people think.
You would just love Oregon to be able to be like, oh, we beat this 9th ranked team this week, wouldn't you? So I got to ask.
Hey, they beat Utah. Go ahead.
Before I get into this, so you're telling me on a neutral field you think Oregon State beats Penn State?
On a neutral field right now, with the way Penn State played last week against the defense that Oregon State has, if they're going to do the same play calling, absolutely. From what I've seen.
Oregon State doesn't have Ohio State's defense, though.
No, they don't. But if he's going to be – but his play calling was absolutely trash. Okay,
yeah,
so
you can get away with calling that game against other teams, though.
That's all right, though. Listen, we're going to respect your list. It's your list. All our lists are different. You go to your number 8 team, and then we'll go across. We'll just sneak through.
No worries. So next up we got Texas. Loss of Quinn Ewers made me a little bit tough on this choice. I almost left him out of the top 10 completely, but I couldn't do that to my man Cottrell. I've been picking on him all year, so I'm not going to take it out on Texas. I don't know what to expect from Malik Murphy, so that's going to be a really telltale sign. But I do trust Jonathan Brooks, with his 825 yards on the ground, 6.4 yards per carry, number 7 in yards in the country. I think he's going to be able to carry the team through with a solid rushing attack. And he's going to have to carry a heavier workload, but I don't think that's going to be a problem for him. And I got their toughest matchups coming up is going to be this week against BYU. I think it's going to be a tougher test than everyone thinks. And then on the 4th, they got Kansas State. But the one thing that's good for them is that both those games are at home, so that does give them a slight advantage. So we'll see how it ends up playing out, but it all kind of relies on Malik Murphy. So after today, we'll have a much better idea what that Texas team is going to look like.
I agree with everything Alex said. I have number 8, and I have number 8 because, I do think they're a college football playoff team ultimately. But that being said, I think they're the most precarious team out of my top 10 right now. And that's even including the 2 teams that are below them. And that's simply because of the health of Quinn Ewers. We're going to see what Malik looks like on, in a couple hours here. But again, they have teams on the schedule. If the injury couldn't have come at a better time, if we're being honest. As long as Quinn can come back in 3 to 4 weeks completely healthy and they get through these next couple weeks, Texas is fine. But they cannot afford to slip up anywhere. I don't think there's more pressure than on any other team in my top 10 than Texas. So I kept them number 8 because, again, I think they end up higher on this list. But the next couple of weeks are going to be very telling. Cottrell,
So number 8 for me, I got Oregon, and I just want to say here, obviously, we got 7 and 8 switched here. I did my rankings based on what has happened so far. Now, projection wise, I do think after this upcoming week, even after Texas wins, I have no doubt that they should beat that BYU team. But I just think right now, the way everything plays out, if Quinn's healthy, I would have Texas at 7. So that's why these two are flip flopped here. But Oregon lost to Washington, Texas lost to Oklahoma. You see where those guys are at, in our rankings here. So I do think these teams are very interchangeable, but these are the two best one-loss teams in the country. So you could argue they're better than some of the undefeated teams as well. We've made the case already about Oregon looking at like the better football team in the game against Washington. So we also have talked about Texas potentially beating Oklahoma in the Big 12 championship. So I think these two are very interchangeable, but I'm going off of what's happened so far in the season, and I didn't factor in Quinn not being there in the rankings for this week.
I have Oregon number 7, and I kind of have them there over Texas for that kind of exact reason. I think I have Oklahoma at number 6, who beat Texas, and I have Washington number 5, who beat Oregon. So I think Oregon's loss is just slightly better, and it was on the road. And Cottrell hit on the big point for me. I came out of that game, and I honestly believe that Oregon's a better football team. That game was at Washington. I think if it was at Oregon, or if it was a neutral site, I think Oregon would have won. But not taking anything away from anybody, because who won that game won that football game. But I still think Oregon has a really good shot of representing the Pac-12, possibly the college football playoff. We'll see. But right now I have a number 7. I agree with Cottrell. I think if push comes to shove, I would pick them over some of the teams above them that don't have a loss. But right now I can only put them there because that's all they've done so far. But I have Oregon number 7.
So I also have the Ducks at number 7, strictly because they are the best one-loss team in the country, and I couldn't rightfully put a one-loss team in front of those undefeateds up above them. So I did have to stick them at number 7. I think they should be number 1, but we'll talk about that later. But 535 yards per game of offense, the only team in the country with top 10 rushing and passing offense. All right, that's something special to put your hat on. And the defense has allowed less than 100 yards per game on the ground. That is a recipe for success. Bo Nix has over 2,000 yards passing, 19 tutties, and 1 interception. We don't worry about that little guy. You all can forget about that little guy, all right? But point of the matter is he's got too many weapons around him. He's got Bucky Irving, 650 yards on the ground, 7 touchdowns. He's ran for over 250 yards the last 2 games. When he's actually played the full game, he's been absolutely dominant. Troy Franklin, 768 yards receiving and 8 touchdowns. Clearly, Bo Nix is number 1 target, and I would say probably the 5th best receiver in the country. I don't want to be too overzealous, but he's definitely top 5 in my mind. And honestly, they are a missed field goal away from being in the top 4 for me. So I'm very happy with putting them at number 7. And they got 3 top matchups coming up with Utah today, USC on the 11th, and then ultimately on Black Friday, Oregon State on November 24th. So it's going to be a great season. I'm excited to see what plays out for them. But again, mentioning Oregon, go ahead, Cottrell. I know you want to say something.
No, I'm. So you said top 5, and kid's very talented. I just was thinking about 5 receivers, and I'm curious to know which one you put him over. So I'm throwing you on the spot here, but I got Marvin Harrison, Emeka Ibuka, because you got 2 from Ohio State. Yes. You got Malik Neighbors.
No.
Keon Coleman.
It's Ibuka. It's Ibuka for me personally.
Okay.
But then again, like I said, he might be better. But again, with Marvin Harrison there, you're not seeing his true potential. So based on the eye test and what I see,
no, I got you.
Troy Franklin's better in my opinion. But no, Neighbors, like I said, is above him. Keon Coleman, definitely. Marvin Harrison Jr., definitely. Was it Xavier Worthy from Texas?
Xavier Worthy, and then Rome Odunze was the other one that I was thinking of.
Yeah, I would put Troy Franklin above Xavier Worthy and behind Rome Odunze.
I like it.
Yeah. But on the spot, like I said, without looking at too much details and not rating a 1 through 5, that'd probably be my top 5.
All right, so where are we on this list now?
We're at me. We're at me, number 6.
Alex just did like 9 picks.
I did not 9 picks. Sorry. We're on number 6 with Washington. I have them ahead of Oregon strictly because they did beat Oregon in the head-to-head. Obviously, Michael Penix is impressive. 2,500 yards, 20 touchdowns. He's only been sacked 4 times. With an offensive line like that, keeping a quarterback like him upright, dangerous things are going to happen. And I think the thought that stuck in my brain is that they're not better than Oregon, but with the showing last week, if they're playing anybody else like last week, they would have lost that game. So, like I said, they're only ahead of Oregon. I think they're the worst undefeated team, so that's where I have them at 6.
Number 6, I'm going to go with Oklahoma. Obviously, they have a huge win in the Red River rivalry. Other than that, not a ton on their resume, but I mean, they're leading the Big 12 right now, and that does count for something. You know, when everybody was as high on Texas as they were, including myself. So, a little bit of a limbo spot here for them. I find it very hard to believe they're not going to get a rematch with Texas. I mean, I think we're at a collision, on a collision course for that. And we'll see if they can do it twice in a row. Because if they do, then they're going to be a very big surprise to be in the college football playoff. And I don't think anybody had at the beginning of the year. But, they're going to have to prove it again. But, again, I think if you asked Brett Venables at the beginning of the year if he was going to be the top 5 or 6 of everybody's list, this point in the season, he'd sign off on it real quick. So I got the Sooners number 6. I think they're still getting better every week. Like I said, I think we're on a collision course for another big showdown with Texas.
So I have the Sooners at number 6 as well. It is very impressive what they were able to do to Texas. I do think a big part of that. I don't necessarily think that Oklahoma was the better team. I think the bigger part was, 1, the revenge factor from last year, and 2, that just being, that huge rivalry game. Anything can happen in those caliber rivalry games. And I think, to me at least, Oklahoma is clearly the worst undefeated team. I think if you put them on a neutral field with Washington, I think Washington might open up at 7.5-point favorites. I think Washington has built that gap just because I respect that Oregon team as much as I do as well. So that's really my discrepancy between Oklahoma and Washington right now. I do realize that Washington looked very down to earth last week. And so with that Washington team, they definitely have to get it up. But I do also think that those kinds of games happen when, you're going up against, great team after great team over there in the Pac-12. And then you feel like you finally get to exhale. And no, that team's right there at your neck, and they're ready to give you their best shot. So I think Washington's going to rebound. So I got Washington at number 5.
I got the Huskies number 5 as well. I'm on record saying I think Oregon's still the better team, but that being said, I have to give credit where it's due, and Washington did win the football game. Do I think if they play again on a neutral site, is the outcome going to be different? I do. But again, that's a living in a world of what ifs, and we have to be, like Charles said earlier, we have to go off what they've done so far. Minus last week, they've been dominant in every game but the Oregon game. And Oregon's a great team, so I mean you're not going to dominate a team like Oregon. They had a little bit of a slip up last week. They still won the football game, which is all that matters, because a lot of times great teams have the one slip up and they don't come out with a W. Washington pulled the game out; they remained undefeated. And then that's why they're top 5 for me. They're very good. Michael Penix Jr. in my opinion is still the front runner for the Heisman. It's can they hold on to it? And I think they're going to get tested again down the stretch, and they got a bunch of tough games coming up. So if they win all them, I think they have every opportunity to move up this list. But for right now, I have them number 5.
And we have them flopped, our 5s and 6s, which I have Oklahoma at number 5. And really, I put them above Washington strictly for depth. Washington has a couple of great receivers on the outside, but Oklahoma has 5. Oklahoma has 5 receivers with over 300 yards, which is about the average for between those 5 if you compare them statistically. Dylan Gabriel spreads the ball around. He's got 5 receivers that can step in and be that guy anytime, and that's a lot for a secondary to shut down. Defense has got 17 sacks on the season and forced 15 turnovers. They've been making something work. The only real issue that I'm having with them right now is I don't hold that UCF close call with them last week. I don't hold that against them. I actually said on the show when Bill said they had a cakewalk, I said hold your horses, not so fast. UCF got the quarterback last week. They're a much better team with him at the helm. So I think Oklahoma was able to pull that one out. And honestly, I like the way that they were able to kind of keep it together, pull out that win. You can tell a lot by a team from their close wins than their blowouts. But so that's why I have Oklahoma ahead of them is strictly for I think their depth is better than Washington's.
Give us 4.
Sorry about that. I need to swallow, Cottrell. Jeez. All right, 4. I got Florida State. Florida State.
At least you know Alex is a classy lady. All right, keep going.
Dang right. So I have Florida State at 4. The good thing with Florida State is that they have gotten through the gauntlet of their schedule already. So they've already taken care of LSU. They've already taken care of Clemson. They just took care of Duke. Coming forward, they have Miami, which that team is not who we thought they were at the beginning of the year. And then they got the closeout game with Florida. So that's obviously being a rivalry game. Could go either way. For me, Florida State's gotten through the meat and potatoes of their schedule, and it's pretty cake from here on out. And with Jordan Travis, he's playing like a Heisman hopeful at 1,750 yards, 15 touchdowns, and only 2 interceptions. I like the way he's been controlling the offense. Trey Benson needs to step it up a little bit and get more ground game get more game going on the ground. Sorry, can't talk today. And then Keon Coleman, obviously we just talked about him. He's top 5 receiver in the country. That's a weapon that any quarterback would want to have. So that's why I have Florida State at number 4, mainly because, like I said, they've gotten through that tough part of their schedule. They've handled it. Now they just got to make sure they don't stumble along the rest of the way.
I agree with Alex. We all have a number 4, so I'm not going to spend too much time on them here. They have a couple good signature wins already. For the most part, they have gotten through the tough part of their schedule. Had the scare at Clemson. Probably should have lost that game. But hey, great teams. Sometimes you need luck, and sometimes you got to find a way to win the game. And they got it that week. That week against Clemson in Death Valley. So. They remain undefeated. Out of the top 4, I think they've been the shakiest along the way. I think they've had a couple games, like the Clemson or even Duke last week, where they haven't been as dominant to me as the top 3 above them, and that's why I have them number 4. Like I said, I think they're going to cakewalk in the ACC championship game, and if they win that, it's going to be really hard to keep them out. So it's going to be really interesting. I think if you're a Pac-12 fan, Alex, you're hoping Florida State loses somewhere. That would make you'd be able to take a little bit more of a deep breath and feel a little bit more comfortable about getting in. But that being said, I have a number 4 for now. They do have a strong resume, and you have to give them credit for their wins.
So Florida State is also my number 4. I think Florida State is a team, though, that's been kind of playing with fire a little bit. You talk about that Clemson game being a game that they really should have lost. They had a game against Boston College that was very close and a game that was very losable for them. And then we just saw what happened this past Saturday against that Duke team, where for 3 quarters, Duke was the better football team. Now, I'm not saying that Florida State is a team that is asking to be beat, like how I said a couple weeks ago with USC, but I do think this Florida State team is going to fall to that right team, and they may go through the regular season undefeated, depending on who they see in that ACC championship game. I think if it's that North Carolina team that ultimately I think is going to end up there, I don't know if I trust Florida State to go off and run the table and be undefeated conference champion. I just think that there's going to be a team that's like, hey, Florida State, you don't want to give us your A game today? All right, we'll give it to you for 4 quarters, and we're gonna get the win. But 100% agree with Bill. I think they have been the shakiest of the top 4, but you have to respect their resume to this point. So I got Florida State there at 4. Biggest surprise probably here, I got Georgia at number 3 here. They haven't played anybody, and they lost their starting tight end, who is their number 1 weapon by far, early in the first quarter against Vanderbilt. Look, I know they're coming off of a bye, and I know all this, but I think that team is going to look drastically different than where where they are right now. And, I see them. I thought they should have beat that Vanderbilt team by 35 points going away with Brock Bowers, without Brock Bowers. Vanderbilt's not a football program. The fact that game was even in striking distance for Vanderbilt kind of tells me where Georgia's at right now. So I'm more so in improve it mode. You could say the same thing about Michigan, and their schedule. Michigan's dominated their entire schedule. So that's why, I'm not getting my number 2, but that's why I have Georgia at 3. I don't think they haven't dominated their entire schedule and they lost Brock Bowers. I think, ultimately they're going to be at number 3.
All right, so I'm going to have to explain mine in a weird way, and I'm going to say it this. I was very, locked into putting Michigan number 2. My biggest decision here was either to make my list look the way it does, or I gave a lot of thought to make it look like Cottrell's does. I think Michigan has been absolutely dominant. They're steamrolling people. The number part of it is just baffling with certain things. Not allowing a touchdown, and they're all there's been 2 games this year where the defense has scored more points than the other team's offense, but they haven't played anybody yet, and I can acknowledge that. My decision came down to either putting Ohio State 1 and rewarding for what they've done, which is pretty much the Notre Dame and Penn State game, or keeping Georgia there and just respecting Georgia for the fact they haven't lost a game in 2.5 years, and kind of until somebody beats them, that's where they're going to stay. And believe it or not, Cottrell probably won't believe me, but believe it or not, I chose the second one, not to spite Ohio State, but to I just think Georgia deserves to stay there until they lose. And I think that's the respect that, they should kind of be given. But this would have been like, if we had parentheses here for like first place votes, I would put Georgia, would have had a couple. I wouldn't have given Michigan any, and I would have put Ohio State with a couple. So I do value Ohio State and what they've done and how they've looked. I think some people don't know how to take Ohio State this year because they don't look like a normal Ohio State team. They're not putting 45 up every game and blowing people out. They're not flashy offensively, but they actually have a very, very good defense this year, and they're just winning. They're winning football games differently this year, and that's not to say it's a bad thing. It's just different, and I just don't think people are used to it. So I think a little people are kind of glossing over what they are, but they're a very, very good football team. So I have Ohio State number 3.
All right. For my number 3, I agree with Cottrell. I have Georgia sitting there. For me, it was that loss of Brock Bowers is just too huge of a loss for them for me to keep them up at number 1. Like I said, kind of like Bill said, he kept them at number 1 for a straight respect factor. For me, I'm looking at it from they got the toughest part of their schedule starting today. They got Florida, Missouri, Ole Miss, and Tennessee. And though they have the number 7 defense, only given 14 points per game, I don't know without Brock Bowers if they're going to be able to keep up with an offense like Missouri, or if that defense is going to be able to keep them under 21 points. And Brock Bowers caught 20% of their offensive passes this season. That's 20% of production out the window. It's going to hurt him somewhere. Going up to number 2, I do have Ohio State at number 2. Their resume is very impressive. It wins at Notre Dame, Maryland, Penn State. Defense number 3 in the country, 10 points per game. Kyle McCord, it is what it is. 12 touchdowns, what should be 2 interceptions. I can't wait till they get Travion Henderson back and in full swing so they can get that running game going. Right now, they're a little one-dimensional. Only averaged 1.6 yards per carry this last weekend against Penn State. And their defense has only been able to force 7 turnovers this season. I would like to see them increase that number. But like I said, Ohio State just finds ways to win. And with a weapon downfield like Marvin Harrison Jr., that's going to be easy for you. They only got a couple games that are really eye-opening for me, and that's November 4th against a very surprising Rutgers team, and then November 25th at Michigan. Both of those games are on the road, so the backs will be up against the wall. But we'll see what Ohio State can do the rest of the way.
Yeah, so I'm not going to spend too much time on Michigan here. I think everything we're going to need to find out about this team is going to happen in the next month. Play Penn State in a couple weeks, and obviously the 26th they play Ohio State. they've looked, they've looked dominating. Like I said, they played Michigan State, last week, and 49-0, the worst beating in the history of that rivalry. They've been playing each other for 100 years. They are just steamrolling people. People are talking about, Blake Corum's numbers being down or whatever. I mean, he's not playing past the middle of the third quarter every game. They're keeping everybody healthy and they're rotating everybody in and out. I think they're the deepest team in the country. I do believe that. I think they have, the defensive line, which a lot of people thought was going to be a weakness, has become a huge strength. The offensive line is starting to finally look like, the two predecessors before them. But, they still have a lot to prove. I think they're great. I think, they passed every eye test you could imagine, but you still got to go and beat good programs, and they have two of them coming up. So until they do that, I think it's hard to put them number one, assuming Georgia or Ohio State are still undefeated.
Yeah, so my number 2, same as Bill, I got Michigan. Michigan has looked great so far, all season long at this point. Biggest thing with them right now is that they haven't played anybody. But, I will say, I got to give Michigan all the credit in the world. I mean, they have been absolutely dominant in every game they've played so far. It's almost like they know what's coming ahead of time. Like, that's how good they've looked so far throughout this season. So, I got to give Michigan all the credit in the world there. And, they got a tough test coming up here in a few weeks against Penn State on November 11th, I believe the date is. So we'll see, where they really are. But, I mean, they've been dominant so far throughout this entire season. So I have them ahead of Georgia because of their lack of struggle so far this season. Number 1, I got Ohio State. You're probably thinking he's got Ohio State because that's his favorite college football team. I got Ohio State at number 1 because they're the only team in the country with 2 top 10 wins throughout this season. I got Ohio State because of the way that their defense has looked so far this season. I think Ohio State is playing great football defensively and offensively, even though McCord isn't quite, that explosive quarterback that I want him to be. The fact that he's still finding ways to get Marvin Harrison Jr. the ball, Emeka Egbuka the ball, and just letting them go to work, I think that just says everything about, how successful this Ohio State offense can be. And, other thing, just kind of want to throw in there. It's just funny because outside of Purdue, going into the Ohio State game, every other team that Ohio State has faced all season, they had a 0 next to their name. And after that game, they left with a 1. So talk about, how good you feel about Notre Dame and them not being as good or Penn State being frauds, whatever the case may be, Maryland not being as good as what we thought. Go in, you take care of business, you're going to be number 1. So that's why
I was the only one who thought Maryland was any good.
Well, Maryland was also a top 35 FPI team as well. So it's not like they didn't get any credit.
And if you think part of the reason Cottrell put Ohio State number 1 is because it's
then you are absolutely right.
You would be correct as well. Number 1, I already said I got Georgia. The only thing I'm going to disagree with you guys are projecting a little bit on Georgia, and I get it. But this is based upon what they've done so far. I think we all agree, and I do agree with everything both of you gentlemen have said about how they're going to look going forward with Brock Bauer being out. And I think it's going to be a difference. And maybe they even slip up somewhere, but they haven't yet. And this is based upon what they've done so far. So I know that injury is going to affect them tremendously going forward, but it hasn't yet. And until it does, I'm going to keep them at number 1.
The one thing that I will say, because I do agree with you there, like we definitely are projecting a little bit there. But at the same time, I can't look at what they've done the last 2 seasons. Like I get the respect factor, things like that. But I would say about you got 25, maybe 30 guys from the last 2 years that aren't on that roster anymore. It's like I can't give them credit for the last 2 years either. Like this isn't that same team.
I don't disagree with you 1 ounce. We've said before that this team is nowhere near as good as the last 2 years. But that being said, the last 2 years you're talking about an all-time back-to-back type run.
For sure.
So, I mean, it's, it's tough to keep that going. I mean, we're getting into kind of like Alabama territory stuff here, but Alex, go ahead. Tell me why Michigan's number one. I'm listening.
I know you're listening, Bill, and I know Cottrell's tuning me out. So, kind of like you guys
I'm
said,
listening.
they haven't really played anybody yet, but you guys are really underestimating that huge win against Rutgers, that 31-7 win that they had. Rutgers has been taking care of business this season, and that's actually a quality win. That I'm not saying a number one ranking quality win, but I'm just saying they actually have played a decent teams this year. They have the number one defense in the country, only allowing 5.9 points per game. That is insane. Whether you have your second stringers in the game for the fourth quarter or not, holding an opponent under 2 field goals a game, that's impressive. JJ McCarthy, 1,800 yards, 18 touchdowns, 78% completion. I think the only person he's behind in completion percentage is Bo Nix. I mean, he's making solid throws, great decisions. Blake Corum, he's going into the second half of the season healthy. He hasn't had a full workload all season, so that's going to be dangerous. The defense has got 21 sacks, 15 turnovers. And, they got Penn State, Maryland, and Ohio State down the pipeline coming up. And the downside is that they haven't really been tested yet. And I want to see what they can do in a game where they don't go there, when things don't exactly go their way and their backs are up against the wall. But J.J. McCarthy's looking good. Blake Corum's going to do his thing. Roman Wilson's 27 catches for 446 yards, 10 touchdowns. I don't really know what else I can say. I mean, Michigan's they're rolling on all cylinders. And like I said, you guys say they haven't played anybody. I don't think you really grasp how good this Rutgers team is. And that was honestly a really solid test for them. They were able to handle business. I'm pretty happy with my Michigan selection as number one. I'm surprised Bill doesn't also have the same.
I don't come on here and do Homer stuff like Cottrell does. So
I promise you.
I try to be objectionable.
I get the Rutgers love, but I promise you, if Ohio State loses to Rutgers, put me on 24-hour surveillance.
Take your shoelaces immediately.
Like that's just not where we are right now.
All right, that went longer than I thought it was going to. So we got to pick it up a tad here to get done, so everybody can get ready for noon kickoff. So we're gonna go right into previews here. Where we start, graphics man. All right, I mentioned this game earlier. Alex will probably jump on this because I think he's the show's anti-Oklahoma fan. At Kansas, Oklahoma, number 6, Oklahoma at Kansas. Could be a sneaky game. Jayhawks don't usually have a ton to be excited about in the football world. They're definitely a basketball school. But the last couple of years, they've had a good team. Dylan Gabriel's going to bring that Sooners team, into town off a very close loss a close win over UCF last week. Alex, I will let you go first on this one. What are you thinking in this matchup?
Yeah, I mean, I really wish we knew if Jalen Daniels was going to be playing in this game or not. I mean, besides the 400-yard passing game last week for Jason Bean, he is not really impressive, and I don't have a lot of confidence in him going into this spot. And Oklahoma is just so explosive on offense, 7th in passing, 4th in points per game. The best thing Kansas has going for them is Devin Neal, who leads the team with 660 rushing yards. And Kansas has played great at home with the only losses coming on the road this season. So I think the home crowd mixed with a lot of Devin Neal on the ground, as long as Jason Bean doesn't turn the ball over, is able to do some quick dump passes, they definitely have a chance to stay in this game. And Oklahoma's last 2 wins were by a combined 6 points. So that defense has been giving up a lot of points. The games have been a lot closer. Like I said, if Jalen Daniels was playing in this game, if I knew that for a fact he was playing, I would feel a lot differently about this game. Right now, without him playing the game, though, I have Oklahoma covering the spread.
Cottrell, what do you got, bud?
I'm on the opposite side of this. I think Kansas covers the spread there. I think Jalen Daniels is ultimately going to be a game time decision. Their coach already came out and said that he's been basically progressing throughout the week. And, there is, still a little bit of ways to go, but their coach says they're very encouraged by what they saw from him throughout practice this week. So I think Jalen Daniels is going to give it a go. And I think that's going to give Kansas that jolt that they're ultimately looking for. So I like Kansas to actually, cover this game. And I'm not going full-fledged upset alert here, but I wouldn't be surprised at all if Kansas won this football game. I think they cover, but I think Oklahoma ultimately escapes. I think this is one of those games where if we talk about teams just kind of looking ahead and keeping that 0 and seeing what's on the horizon. I think this is a game that could potentially catch OU slipping a bit.
So this for me is kind of very reminiscent of the Duke Florida State game last week. I think if Jalen plays, I really agree with Cottrell. I think this has the ability to be a very close game, and Kansas could stay in and maybe even pull it out at the end. If he doesn't play, though, I think it ends up being the Florida State Duke game. I think Oklahoma's just going to have too much. I think they're going to be able to get too many stops. Dylan Gabriel's going to get too many chances against that Kansas defense. So it's really hard for me to pick it off that. I would go kind of like Cottrell. I think if he doesn't play, I like Oklahoma to cover. If he does play and he's actually healthy enough to actually really go and be the athlete and the player that, we've seen him to be the last 3 years, then I think Kansas covers. But if not, I kind of like Oklahoma to pull away here.
Yes, I love Jalen Daniels. It really all depends on if he plays for me as well.
Duke versus Louisville. Me and Cottrell talked about this game on Wednesday, and I'm going to say the same thing I did then. I don't know. I don't think Riley Leonard's going to play. And if he doesn't, then I like Louisville by a lot. I don't know what the spread is sitting at right now.
6.5.
So it went up 2 points already, which leads me to believe that Vegas already knows that he's not going to play because this was 4.5 on Wednesday when me and Cottrell talked about it on the wire to wire. I like Louisville here at home. We saw what Riley Leonard was last week. I don't think he's going to play. Even if he does play, he's still going to be nowhere near 100%. He's only going to be a week better than he was last week, and that's, I'm sure he was extremely sore and swollen and bruised up after that game Saturday. He might actually went backwards. So I'm not going to spend a ton of time on this. For me, I'll let you guys jump in here, but I like Louisville at home to cover on this one.
Alex, I'll go real quick here just because, I said my opinion on the show. Riley Leonard is doubtful for this game. I don't think he's going to play. I think Duke's hopes and dreams for the season went out the door last week with them losing to Florida State. And so I think they're going to sit Riley Leonard. I think that's going to be the good move for him. Coming back early from a high ankle sprain is already tough to do, and I think that's just the safe move moving forward. I think even if you go out there and you throw out a 50% Riley Leonard, you're going to lose to this Louisville team. So I like Louisville. I had them at 4.5 on Wednesday. I still like them even at that 6.5 number. I think they take care of business against a Duke team that's just really deflated at this point. I
don't know why people don't listen to me. Remember last week, I am the ankle expert, ankle savant. I said, Riley Leonard, my man, please do not play. You're going to be jeopardizing the rest of the season. And they lost the game, just like I said they were going to, and now he's out another week. He sat out last week. He's playing this game, and it looked like a much better situation. But Louisville's defense is highly underrated, allowing only 20 points per game, and they're holding all of their opponents to less than 100 yards on the ground, which is what Duke is going to heavily rely on this week with a heavy dose of Jaquiz Moore, who was a bright spot last week against Florida State. But on the flip side, Louisville is also missing Jawar Jordan, who is their top running back. He is also a game time decision. He only had two carries last week. And if he plays, this game is going to be absolute blowout because he's a game changer on the offensive side of the ball. But in the meantime, the offense is going to need to utilize Jamari Thrash, 639 yards receiving and 6 touchdowns for Louisville, and Jaquiz Moore for 390 yards and 3 touchdowns on the ground for Duke. Those are the two playmakers that I see stepping up and helping their teams out with Riley Leonard and Jawar Jordan out. I do ultimately have Louisville winning this game. I think that 6.5 spread is right where it should be. And Louisville's going to go Louisville's going to take this one.
All right, here's the game. We with the number one team in the country, Georgia, that we've kind of hinted at already a little bit. Biggest, what is this called? The biggest cocktail party in the South, or whatever they call it. I forget what the nickname is. Yeah, is that right? Is that accurate?
I believe so.
Okay. This game is being played in Jacksonville, Florida, so it is a neutral site game. It'll be half Georgia, half Florida. This game, I will say this. This game is also very similar to the Red River rivalry in that there's a lot of upsets in this game. There's been years where Florida's been like 2 or 3 and Georgia's been like 18th, and Georgia's gone and stomped them, and vice versa. It's a weird rivalry to me in that, like, growing up, I never remember being like, oh, like Florida and Georgia was like this like crazy rivalry. But I mean, they play this game every year, and it's a big deal, and both fan bases love it. It's an excuse to go to Jacksonville for the weekend and hang out and drink.
I was going to say, and get hammered.
But here we are. Georgia's first game out, coming off the bye week. What does Carson Beck and company look like without Brock Bauer? Florida has been sneaky, kind of sneaking back up towards the rankings. Had kind of a very sloppy start to the year, I guess you could put it that way. I had Billy Napier on the hot seat early. They've kind of steadied the ship and kind of got back into it. It still boils down to this: do you believe Graham Mertz can go beat Georgia? Because that's what you're going to need. That's what you're going to need to have happen for that to happen. And I don't know if I'm ready to make that statement on a public show that can be held against me in the future. So I am going to go Georgia here. I don't think they cover though. This is a rivalry game. I mentioned it already. These games are closer than they usually should be sometimes. I think Florida can hang in it. I think if Florida can run the ball decently and take some of that pressure off Mertz, I think they can hang around. Not a typical Florida defense that we're used to seeing in the past with a bunch of, first and second rounders on it, but they're solid. They're a little bit bend, don't break type defense. I like Georgia to win, but again, I don't think they cover. I'll take Florida plus the 14.5 here. I think it's a close game. I think the Bulldogs pull it out though.
Okay. For me, the question is can Florida run the ball against Georgia? In their 2 losses this year, they've averaged less than 50 yards per game. And in their wins, they've gone for over 130 every single time. So if they can get the ball rolling on the ground with Etienne and Johnson, I think that they can open up the passing game for Graham Mertz. And he's looked really good lately. Only one interception in his last 5 games. And he even had a 423-yard game against South Carolina where he looked fantastic. That was a great battle between him and Spencer Rattler. And then on the other hand, what will Georgia look like without Brock Bowers? A quarter of their passing offense goes through Brock Bowers. That's completely gone. Who's going to pick up the slack and help out that offense move down the field? Florida's defense only has 4 turnovers this season, and I do expect them to try to force Carson Beck to beat them. They did get absolutely steamrolled by Kentucky on the ground game earlier this year. So I do feel like they're going to try to force Georgia to go through the air, and Carson Beck has thrown an interception in the last 3 games. So we'll see if that trend continues. I do have Florida covering the 14.5, and I am stamping my approval for upset alert on this game.
I'm going full-fledged upset alert here as well. It's not my actual, like when we go to upset alert, this is the game I'm going to be using, but I'm right there with you, Alex. I think this game has upset alert written all over it. Look, you guys know how much of a non-believer I am in Graham Mertz. He's shown me time and time again he's not going to be prepared and he's not going to be ready to win that big game. But I think this game just feels a little bit different. I like what Florida has done with Graham Mertz. They haven't asked him to do too much. He's been taking care of the football, and they've been running the ball very effectively. The other thing is that obviously, we talk about Brock Bowers not being there and Georgia having time to prepare and put together a game plan without Brock Bowers with this bye week. Florida's also coming off of a bye week. So I think that gave, Billy Napier and company a couple weeks to put together a rushing attack and a game plan to really attack that Georgia Bulldogs team. And I think if you can keep this to being a lower scoring game and kind of drag it out how you've seen Georgia really been dragged to muddy, deep waters earlier on this season, I think you got a real shot to win this game. Obviously, we saw a few weeks ago, Auburn had a lot of success on the ground with going up against that Georgia defensive front. And I know I even said it on the show. A lot of that was predicated on the fact that their quarterback was running read options and really making those defensive linemen think. But I mean, I think you have a shot to keep this game, under 27, 21 points for that Georgia offense. So I think if you keep it there, you keep the ball on the ground and you control that time of possession, I think Florida is a live dog to actually go to Jacksonville and get a win in this game. So I like Florida to cover. I won't officially say Georgia wins. I do like them to cover, but I would not be surprised at all if Florida went out and got them a win in Jacksonville.
See, Cottrell, now you're on the fence. Just make your statement, man. Are they going to win or not? Just make your statement. Be conviction. Let's go, man.
Hey, Georgia wins. Florida covers.
All right, there we go.
Hey,
no, you did on me last week.
to the main course, as you will, the main event of the weekend. The number 8 Oregon Ducks going into Salt Lake City to play the Utah Utes. Coming off a huge win.
I think the real question is, who has Utah pissed off to only be 17 in the rankings?
You're not wrong. You're not wrong. Well, I mean, maybe they beat the Ducks beat the Ducks later today. Maybe they get that respect. We'll see. I am actually going to turn this over. I'll let Alex go first for obvious reasons, and let Cottrell come in. I'm actually picking this game, so I am not going to say too much about it.
So I'm also picking this game. But you already know. Everyone in the world knows who I'm picking. So I don't care.
Cottrell, are you picking this too?
No. You got Utah covering, Alex?
All right. I'm going to start with this. 2 teams. Both at 6-1. 2 teams in a must-win situation. Pac-12 title game implications are at its highest. Utah 29-1 at home in their last 30 games.
That's a stat.
That's a stat. And now, without the lingering questions of Cam Rising, I feel like Bryson Barnes can fully take the reins. And last week, we saw a different version of him when he was able to drive Utah down the field to beat USC. And some people, well, not everybody called it, but I called it because I got respect for Utah. Okay? But here's the problem. Bucky Irving, Bo Nix, they're the problem. Will they sell out to stop Bucky Irving, or will they drop back in coverage and eliminate Troy Franklin? There's too many weapons on Oregon's offense that Utah is going to have to stop. And like last week, they did just that with USC. They dropped back. Caleb Williams did not beat them with his arm. But guess what happened? USC averaged 6 yards per carry. If you drop back an extra receiver, an extra defensive back, Bucky Irving is going to run wild for over 200 yards this week. So they got to kind of pick their poison. You're going to let Bo Nix run up his Heisman numbers, or you're going to let Bucky Irving run all over you. So they're going to have to pick their poison this week. And the Oregon defense is fierce in its own right, only allowing 312 yards per game. And Utah's offense, besides last week, has really not been that impressive, only scoring 7 points against Oregon State. And Oregon's defense is far superior to Oregon State's. I feel like they're going to have a very similarly hard time moving the ball against Oregon, just like Colorado did with Shedeur Sanders. And even Michael Penix had some issues moving the ball at times throughout the game. I do believe Oregon covers a 6.5. And I would even go as high as say the line should be 13.5.
Oh.
That's a long way from I respect Utah.
This is starting to sound like Oregon, Washington again.
I do respect Utah because I said Washington was going to lose by 21. Utah's only going to lose by 14.
That is true.
Respect.
Those are the facts.
But no, that is a crazy stat though. 29-1 in the last 30 home games. They haven't lost in I think it's like the last 15 home games they're undefeated or something like that. So I'm looking forward to Oregon going in and taking care of that streak and making them 29-2.
No, that's definitely a stat for sure. And I think that stat to me is why I think this game is going to be closer than it really should be. I still have Oregon winning, and I actually think Oregon covers as well. I think this is just going to be a somewhat lower scoring game. I think when you look at that Ducks offense, you're like, hey, they walk out the tunnel, they could put 40 points on the field. And I think against Utah, that's just not going to be the case. I think Oregon scores like 27, maybe 31 or so. I got Utah scoring like 17. So I got 27-17. I got Oregon covering. But I do think this game is more than likely going to hit the under. I don't think you're going to see Bo Nix or Bucky Irving have crazy explosive games. I think they have success, but I don't think this is anything like what we saw with Oregon and Washington.
The over-under is only at 47.5 for this game.
44 is under.
I know. I'm saying like that's a pretty low number.
It is.
That'd be a risky bet to take that.
I take it. I'd be good with it.
All right. Well, there's our previews. Okay.
I also think too, because if it gets higher scoring, I'm with you, Alex. I don't think Oregon's defense is going to allow Utah to go and score 34 points like how Utah did either. So even if, Oregon is consistently moving the ball, I think if that's the case, that means they're getting a ton of possessions, and that means Utah's not scoring a lot of points.
There you go. All right, I'm with it.
All right, so those are our previews for the week, the biggest games and matchups of Week 10. We're going to go to pick 'em now.
Got upset alert first.
We're going to do upset alert first. We're doing it after. I don't know. I keep getting us confused. All right, we're doing upset alert first. I don't know shit.
I'll make it simple. I've already claimed my upset alert. I am picking it. Florida goes in, beats Georgia. Georgia's out. Let's go.
Cottrell.
Okay, so I'm going to go. I'm not as bold as Alex. I love the pick, Alex. I actually do have a 4-leg parlay today. I got Kansas, Florida, Kentucky, and Colorado on the money line. I don't think it hits, but hey, if it does, you got a crazy day of college football. But
What's
the pick that I'm $10 for 3,600.
Hey, all right.
So.
So who's your upset alert?
Official pick this week? I like Wyoming plus 4.5 going to Boise, take on Boise State. I think Wyoming is a team that has played very well all season long, and Boise is one of those tough places to play. It's not easy to go get a win on that blue turf, but I think if any team's going to be up for it, it's going to be that Wyoming Cowboys team. They've seen some stiff competition so far this year. They've been able to put up points against pretty much everybody on their schedule so far. I think they are more than capable to go to Boise and ultimately get that win. So they're my pick this week.
I almost took Wyoming. That was one of my last ones I was kind of zeroing in on, but I don't like picking against Boise on the Smurf turf. I just don't like doing it, so I stayed away from it. I'm going to go Kentucky plus 3.5 at home and Tennessee home underdog. Love that. Love when teams get disrespected in their own stadium. I think Tennessee, a little bit of a letdown coming after beating off Alabama. Kentucky really needs to win this game to really even stay relevant in a good bowl game discussion and all those type things. I think Bray Davis and company, I think they have a very good shot at home to take care of Tennessee and Joe Milton. So I'm going to go with Kentucky. That's my upset alert of the week.
I gave you my parlay, so that's one of the teams I'm rolling with. So I love that.
I love that.
I'm with both of you. Alex got Florida outright. I like Kentucky outright. So let's just hope we're right here, guys.
You need Coach Prime off a bye week to come through for you the late window.
Yeah, that's a fact.
Woo! Look at that.
We are in a very tight race, and I think Bill just got a little frozen there.
He'll be back. He'll be back in a second. But
Well,
I went 3-0 last week. I was very lucky. I was falling behind, and I needed that.
Alex, don't call it luck. When you know what you're talking about, you're bound to hit on.
That's true.
The numbers are going to balance out. So don't call it luck because you're not new to this.
That's true. But gambling always finds a way to.
Yeah, I mean, that's what happens right now with sports, and there's so much money involved. So even if the game goes how you want it to go, we even talked about a little bit on Wire to Wire. Even if the game goes exactly how you thought it was going to go, there might be a little birdie in somebody's ear saying, "Hey, let's make sure we get these numbers right." And we cover we cover some spreads here.
Jesus. Hey, Bill, welcome back to the rave.
Welcome back to the rave.
All right.
All right. So I guess Alex is going first. Cottrell's going second, and I'm going last.
You got it. All right. Well, I am repping the Pac-12 this week, doing all 3 Pac-12 picks. So first off, I got Oregon. We just talked about this game. I got Oregon easily covering that 6.5 against Utah. Staying in the same exact state, though, Oregon State and Damian Martinez are going to go into Arizona. I can't believe they're only 3.5 points favorites right now against Arizona. I have them covering that handedly, with Damian Martinez having a huge game. And then we're going to wrap it up in the Pac-12 with UCLA covering the 16.5-point spread against Colorado, with a heavy dose of Carson Steele, with that absolute atrocious Colorado defense allowing over 157 yards on the ground. UCLA is averaging 215 yards on the ground. I can't wait to see Carson Steele rack up those numbers. I'm calling a huge game for him. 175 yards, 3 touchdowns. Count them, 1, 2, 3. And I have Colorado getting not eliminated. I have their offense struggling just like it did against Oregon, maybe scoring 14 points. UCLA kind of running away with it. And then, last but not least, my super dog. We were all talking about Texas earlier, how excited we were for their, for the season, what our aspirations were for them. I think that Quinn Ewers' injury is going to hurt them a lot more than you think it will, especially early in the game, which is going to allow BYU to have some momentum. They might even have the lead going into halftime, which will allow them to easily cover that 19.5-point spread against Texas. Like I said, I think Texas does win. BYU, 5-2 team. They're going to go in there with a chip on their shoulder. They're going to be battling hard. I think Malik Murphy is going to make a couple mistakes in the first half that gets BYU into some good scoring position, and I think that keeps the game close up front. And then ultimately, like I said, Texas wins, but BYU is definitely covering the 19.5.
I like them. Well, you heard my parlay earlier, so you know I like the dogs this week, and I'm not talking about Georgia. Kansas, the lines moved down to 9, so but I got Kansas at +10 versus Oklahoma. I think there's a very good chance that they find a way to win that game. Jalen Daniels, still very much up in the air, but either way it goes, I still like Kansas to cover those 10 points there. Second game I like. Team that Bill put on upset alert, Kentucky. I love them +3.5 at home versus that Tennessee team. Tennessee knows that their season is over at this point. They got to go to Lexington and take on that Wildcats team that loves to run the football at home. And, Devin Leary is going to be there. He's not going to make mistakes. I think they take care of business. They get that win at home. Last game I got Florida plus the 14.5 in Jacksonville versus Georgia. Again, we talked about that game at length already. I think Florida is going to keep that game as tight as possible because I think Georgia's offense is very much going to struggle without Brock Bowers being on the field. Then my super dog, I'm going against Alex here. I like Colorado plus 17.5 at UCLA. I think a big part of that is because they lost the game to Stanford that they absolutely shouldn't have. You give up you give up a 29-0 lead at halftime and ultimately go on and lose the game. Those kids should be festering and they should come out with their hair on fire in this game later tonight. So I fully expect Coach Prime to have a great game plan to put up points against that UCLA team. And they're not going to be able to stop Dante Moore and company. But I do think that Colorado is going to be able to put up points. I got that one being a shootout. I think it's going to be like a 48-41 kind of game, similar to what we saw Colorado USC. I think UCLA ultimately comes out on top, but why not just sprinkle a little bit of money on that money line for them? So those are my picks for the week.
All right. I'm going to get into mine here. First, I'm going to start. I'm taking UNC minus 10.5 at Georgia Tech. UNC coming off their dud loss goes to Georgia Tech. Georgia Tech is a terrible football team this year. They got spanked at home by Bowling Green. I think North Carolina comes out all guns blazing, try to get back on track. Drake May and company, I think absolutely go to Georgia Tech and put it on them. So I'm taking UNC minus 10.5. Secondly, can't believe I'm doing this. I'm going to take Ohio State minus 14.5 at Wisconsin. Mordecai is not going to play for Wisconsin. They're on their backup quarterback. They've struggled to move the ball this year, even with Mordecai. I don't think Ohio State has too much of a letdown coming off their big home win against Penn State. I think they go to Madison. I think it's probably an exciting game for about a quarter. And then I think the defense clamps down. And I think, I think McCord and Harrison go to work. I like Ohio State big there. Last but not least, Oregon minus 6.5 at Utah. Give me the Ducks. I think this is finally the combination of the team that Utah has been kind of skating around all year. They've played teams with good defenses but no offenses. They've won low-scoring games that way. They went and played USC and a team with a really good offense but no defense, and they outscored them. Oregon's going to be the first team they play that plays well on both sides of the ball. Only thing even remotely concerning me about this pick now is the big weather change that happened out west. It's going to be cold there tonight. They are, they're talking about high 30s, low 40s. It always scares me with Bo. So I'm a little weary about this pick now with the way the weather's drastically changed the last 2 days. But that being said, I think Oregon goes into Salt Lake City and handles business. So I'm going to take the Ducks -6.5. My super dog, I'm going with Team Cottrell on this one. I like Colorado +17.5 at UCLA. I know, I've talked about Dante Moore a million times and how much better he plays at home than he does away. I think it's a great game. I just think Dion and those guys, I think the bye came at the right time for them after that Stanford loss. I think he got to probably give him a couple of days off, let him get away and come back and regroup. And I think you're going to see a very focused Colorado team later tonight. And I'm not saying they win the game. I think Shador and them, I think a lot of guys on the team that were banged up as well. Let them get away for 2 weeks, heal up a little bit. I think Colorado's offense looks real good tonight. So I'm going to go Colorado +17.5 at UCLA. I think they snag me and Cottrell some super dog points.
Well, good. I can make up some ground.
Maybe. But that is it for Week 10. Great slate of games today. I think we finally got the schedule decently right, where there's a pretty good game in every time slot for today.
Yes, that's a fact.
So
I wish we were playing earlier. I don't like being in the 7:30 slot for Wisconsin, but I'll take it.
They did that for atmosphere, and Madison will be
NBC has it, so
try to hype that game a little bit. And they had to put somebody at 7:30 because Michigan is not playing. So you guys are the next logical choice. But yeah, I mean, it's if today is a day where you can literally sit on the couch and watch a good game in every time slot and not have to go surfing for something. So all the good games are on the big channels. You mentioned 7:30 with Ohio State. You got the late games tonight. It's going to be a good day. So any final thoughts from you gentlemen?
I got one question for you guys, and it is not college football related, but we have the time, and I just want a quick answer because I forgot to bring it up on Wednesday. Who we got later today? Francis Ngannou versus Tyson Fury, and how does that end?
Tyson Fury, he's got way more experience.
I think Tyson Fury is universes ahead of Ngannou in boxing pedigree and skill set, technicality. Listen, Francis has boulders for hands. I also think the bigger gloves kind of negate that a little bit, which is his biggest strength. I other than landing the one punch, I think this fight ends when Tyson wants it to end, and I believe that. I think he can kind of play with them and toy with them, and almost kind of make this look like an exhibition, which it really is. But I think it's I think Tyson Fury wins. I think if you listen to trash talk, Tyson says he's going to finish him, blah, blah, blah. I don't know if Tyson goes out to completely embarrass him. I don't.
He doesn't.
Because I think they're kind of buddies behind the scene. This is one of those type deals. So I think Tyson Fury wins. I think it's convincing. I don't think it's a knockout, though. I think it's just an absolute clinic.
I got eighth round TKO. I think he toys with them. I think he lets Francis win maybe the second or the third round. So going into the fourth, it's like Tyson's up 2-1, and then he dominates the next 5 rounds, and ultimately refs like, all right, that's enough. 8th round. I don't think Francis is going to have the juice to fight Tyson Fury for 10 rounds in boxing. And I also think that, Tyson is smart enough not to get put out by Francis Ngannou. So I think he toys with them. They give the fans a show. They keep it going a little bit longer. 8th round comes. He's like, all right, I'm ready to get out of here. Let's put everything to bed. And that's ultimately what happens.
What's that? That's what, like 2?
That's when it starts, yeah. So main event's probably going to go on like 5.
5, yeah. I don't know how much it is, but if you want to go piss some money away, I mean, go order that pay-per-view by all means.
Slate's too good for me to go do that. So
Agreed. I'll be watching football. Sorry.
All day.
All day.
but that's it though for me.
All right, boys. Another solid
Good show.
episode. We're actually late on time. Look at us. We're gonna give everybody at least 10 minutes to get to the couch today.
Get some
always a
snacks.
plus. Snacks, little
You're
pee
welcome.
break.
Might take a number
Oh,
2
well.
this week just cause.
You never know. If you got time, drop the kids off at the pool. We will be back next week as always every Saturday. Like, share, get it out there, and we'll be back next week.
All right. Well, take it easy. Have fun.
Take it easy, guys.